Gonna be great. Okay. So we were just talking about you fucking off the whole time. See how serious you're actually going to take this.
Yeah. It's nice being on somebody else's show. I have no responsibilities whatsoever. I could sit here and just blindly look at you when you ask me questions. I don't have to do a damn thing that you tell me to do.
I I feel so I feel so at a like I'm so concerned right now all of a sudden. I've never been this concerned on one of my own shows. I mean, I went on yours. This is Andy, everyone. Andy Stumpf that you've been begging me to have on the show. And I finally got cornered in a text message and he agreed. And you are a former Navy SEAL. And I say former because we had this discussion and you don't like to be called a Navy SEAL. You like to be referred to as a former Navy SEAL because that is not all that you are. You're also a gay porn star in the background and you skydive and do cool things. And you're also the host of the Cleared Hot podcast.
Some of what you said is correct. Yes. I would prefer the SEAL thing gets weird. You often see people who become defined by their experiences or their job titles. And I would love to get to a place in my life where people would be shocked to find out what I used to do for a living. And I'll be the first person to admit that it does open doors sometimes. It can get you into rooms that maybe you shouldn't be in or get people to pay attention when maybe they shouldn't. So I'm really proud of the time that I served, but I would rather be known for being a gay porn star. My career, as we discussed, is still in its infancy. So I'm working my way up from fluffing to starring at some point. But it's a tough road that has a lot of potholes and you got to navigate them. So I have a lot of work ahead of me. But maybe one day I'll just be known for that instead.
Well, you'll continue to fill those holes along the way, and that's all that matters. And that's what we ask. We ask that Andy fills the holes of all of the potholes along the way to his porn star career. When you just said fluffing, I felt like that was a new term that you've learned since our last conversation because that was not a term.
That was an old one. That was an old one. Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
Okay. Well,
in full disclosure, like porn has never been my thing. Like I get it. I've been around it. It's just like, yeah. But the guys I worked with, some of them had what I would call a very severe addiction. So I learned all the terminology. Oh God. I mean, guys are savages. Some guys are savages. And, there's a reason that the porn industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm talking about this like I have a fucking clue about what I'm talking about.
I know it. I love to the intensity of which it's coming out of you.
No, the personalities of the people that I used to work with were very, in some ways, they were very binary. It was all in or all out, pun intended, on the gay porn. And, but it was like a light switch. And it was like that with skydiving for some guys, or triathlons for some guys, or cars. It was just like, that's their thing. And that's what they did. And some of the guys I worked with,
porn was it.
Porn was it. And they went,
they went,
yeah. Oh man. We're talking going to the porn conventions in Vegas. This is where my knowledge comes from, of sitting back in the corners of rooms, just like scratching my head going, you did what this weekend? You went where? Are you out of your goddamn mind?
I love that so much because I feel like somebody has to be the adult in the room, but then also these guys that you worked with, porn or non-porn related, there's an intensity to that job. And I think that comes in all things when you are doing, something like that. It's hard to switch that light switch off on weekends or nights off. You want that intensity, whether you're doing it in the military or just part of your daily civilian life, it feels like.
I think it allows you to do some incredible things, but it's a tool that I think you have to constantly monitor, because you can dive in so deeply on one thing that it's to the exclusion of everything else in your life, whether that be your work, family balance, your mental health, self-care. I've seen that they get so committed and so passionate about whatever it is that a lot of the other stuff falls off along the way, and they can become world-class at that one thing. But it's like, what's the cost? What is it that you're actually, what's the trade-off? So it's an incredible tool, but manage it appropriately and keep track of it.
Do you find that that happens frequently? Do you find that it happened frequently in that line of work where it was an all-consuming, all or nothing type attitude?
The job itself was pretty all consuming. I think most, maybe not when the guys were serving. I don't know if they would have the awareness or objectivity to say in the moment that the job comes first and everything else suffers. But I think as they distance themselves from the job, it would be very hard to be objectively honest about yourself and your career and not say that. I mean, I've arrived at that point. I didn't really realize it because it wasn't in the forefront of my mind at the time, but the job comes first and everything else does suffer and come second. I mean, there's a reason why the divorce rate in the SEAL teams is probably, this is like largely anecdotal. I don't have an actual spreadsheet to point at, but I would say 80 to 85%.
A little higher. It's roughly 90 to 95% in the special forces community for divorce.
Yeah. So, I mean, there you go. And
like astronomical.
It is astronomically high. And a lot of those divorces, that's talking about just while people are in.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of issues that you still have to work through when you get out. In my own situation, I am divorced. I never thought that I would be divorced, and it fell apart more so after I was done doing that job, because by putting the job first, you don't have time to really work through a lot of this stuff that I wish, in hindsight, I wish, that we could have maybe worked through some of those issues. I'm not saying that we would have successfully been able to do so, but let's just say that there was a full Santa Claus bag of things to unwrap at the end of it. And it proved in my situation, to not be possible. And I think that's true for a lot of the guys. So even in service, it being that high, there's still a lot of issues when they get out as well, because you're probably going to spend more time with each other than you ever have while you were in. And that can be pretty jarring and shocking too.
How long? So you were in 17 years total.
Mm-hmm. 1 month shy of 17 years. It's just easier to say 17 years than 16 years, 11 months in a day.
Yeah, you don't need to be that. I feel like when people do that, I mean, it feels like I just don't like that. Just give me a round number. It helps stick in my brain.
I figure the government can spot me 30 days.
Say again?
So I figure the government can spot me 30 days just to, ease of me saying that.
I feel like you've done enough. So if they don't, well, they're just shitheads. Or shit pumps, because that seems to be the new word after your show. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
What I was going to say to you though was, were you guys married previous to you being in the service?
No, because we would have had been married when I was 17. For that,
I didn't work out the math. You're asking somebody who failed grade 9 math 3 times. Do I look like?
Yeah, no. So we were married pre 9/11. We got married actually February of 2001. Obviously, 9/11 being in September of 2001. So we were dating before that though. So we right in 2000 is when we first got together. Actually, I take that back, late 99. So she experienced a pre 9/11 workup and deployment to Guam. So I was a SEAL when we met. She got exposed to the SEAL community via the relationship, but I mean, not the pre 9/11 and post 9/11 worlds were definitely different sports.
What was that like for you, like with the pre 9/11? Because I know we talked a little bit about it before, but I can imagine that obviously doing only one tour in that time, like that tiny turnaround. I'm just curious because she got a little bit of a taste of that and what that was like. But after that, what was that like? What was your road like? How quickly did you rotate out? I'm just trying to put some context for the listeners, because I don't think they fully, when you say pre and post 9/11, if for a civilian, if you don't really pay attention to that, that just means the towers went down. They don't quite grasp what that means to somebody who's a SEAL and the ramp up level and to the extent that it happens.
Well, even in the pre 9/11 era, most of the training that we did, I lived in San Diego at the time. Most, if not all of the training that we did not occur in the San Diego area. I mean, we need places where we can shoot rockets and sniper rifles and jump out of airplanes. And so even pre 9/11, you're on the road a lot. And pre 9/11, it was an 18-month workup for a 6-month deployment. So it was 2-year chunks.
Oh, wow.
And in that 18-month workup, you're probably gone 2/3 of the time just on training blocks. And then the deployment, you're obviously gone as well. So it's not like it was drastically different in the amount of time that I was gone. I would say well, I mean, I say that, and then, the years right after 9/11, there was a couple years where I was gone, at least away from the house, 270 days a year, and a couple years where I was
Jesus.
away from the house, 300 plus days out of the year. But again, you still have to, I mean, and that's not all just being overseas. You still have to maintain your currency by training and going on training trips and all of that stuff. So I was gone a good amount pre 9/11. I was probably gone a little bit more post 9/11, but maybe the big difference is, you're going to a place where the expectation is that you may not come back from both parties. Normally on a training trip, the only way you're not going to come back from that is some horrendous, catastrophic accident, which is very, very infrequent. It does happen, but it's very infrequent. So it doesn't make it any easier, and the divorce rate is what it is, probably for that reason. It's a very physically demanding, mentally demanding job that has some time requirements that are largely unheard of outside of that community.
Yeah, I mean, that's really intense because I didn't even realize that your workup was to that level because I mean, I say normal soldier, I mean, just like an NCO, like the workup is a couple months. And even then, it's not far away. Most of the time, you're like a province over, or you're just down in the States. Like when you guys go hard. I know the British go down to Africa a lot. And I mean, that's a stretch just to travel, do that distance and travel. That's like a deployment on its own. And so it felt like when I was listening, the more I've started to talk to SF guys like you, it seems like you were all willing to take that burden on and do that. But I wonder if, it's hard to look at the other side with the wives and the women and what that's like, because if you're having kids and then you're essentially becoming a single parent, and then that distance apart alone, that just separates you two, because there's only so much connection you can have with somebody over that time frame. So it doesn't shock me that the divorce rate is what it is, but it does blow my mind a little bit sometimes when I hear the rarity of somebody making it through SF for a long stretch, like Jocko and his wife, for example.
Yeah.
That's a dime a dozen.
It's a combination of things. Obviously, my divorce is not too far in the rear view mirror, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about not only myself and my own actions, behavior, and baggage that I brought into it that led up to that. I don't try to spend any time really thinking about the other side of that equation, nor do I talk about really any of the specifics, because it would be unfair for me to say anything absent her
Fair
having
enough.
a platform as well. But where I land is, it's a combination of two things. It's, the age at which I got married. If I could change one thing, I would have waited a little bit when I got married and I was, 23 years old. I don't think I understood even who I was as a person yet. And I think if I had waited a little bit, the realization, and I think my ex-wife would agree to this statement, that we probably weren't the right people for each other.
Okay.
So I think it's more about the people in that equation than necessarily the circumstances that they're in. Jocko and his wife, Helen, they're amazing people. I was just spending time with them out in Maine not too long ago. And it kind of reaffirmed that, the most critical portion of the marriage or the relationship is the people that are in it, not necessarily the circumstances that they have to navigate their way through. So
Right.
I wish I
Yeah,
could have been a different person, at times in my marriage, but I don't think I was capable of it. So yeah, I mean, it just sucks either way. For anybody who's ever gone through a divorce, they know what I'm talking about. There's no great way to end it. There's no real way to feel great about yourself after the process. It's shitty.
Well, at least, owning your part in it and not just throwing it back on, oh, I was deployed, I was away, I couldn't be there, instead of actually saying, hey, this was something I wish I could have done better, or I wish, I was young. It doesn't make excuses for it, but it owns up to the circumstantial situation you guys were in and how you guys dealt with that. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because a lot of people that listen to this I'm finding out now, are either trying to join the military or currently in and asking advice about these things because they don't know how to navigate these waters. And that's, I think, an important thing to highlight when discussing it is, your own part in this. It matters, and it's not just all on the person who's not with you or deployed with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're very right. I mean, after spending the brief time I had with Jocko and then spending some time with Helen alone, you learn very quickly that it takes to be with either one of those, it takes a very special person because
Yep.
they're both very strong-minded A type, but in a very like what's the word I'm looking for? They're very kind-hearted people, but they both are very driven individuals and they counterbalance each other well with that, I
Yeah.
find.
Yeah, they're a really good match.
Yeah, that and it seems to, like you said, that seems to make a huge difference, obviously. But marrying young, I know that. I mean, I got married, I don't say 24, I think it was. So it's I understand what you say, but you don't quite know who you are at that point, and we always seem to jump on that. Oh well, you get married young, and everything just works out. But people grow and change and develop, and so I understand that. What I was going to bother you about, and besides the porn career, because that after your show, thanks for that. Since we started that conversation, the amount of
Don't say
memes,
we, since you started that conversation.
no, we, because you fed right into it. You opened the door and people took you seriously. I get memes now with your face superimposed on other dudes, and those are things I can't unsee.
You're welcome.
No,
You're welcome.
no, because then what happens is I send them to you and you say nothing. And I feel like if I'm the one who has to see them, you also have to witness them.
I'm fine with that. As long as you're suffering. I mean, they don't bother me. So as long as there's some type of pain and suffering for you, I totally accept that.
There's a reason I'm sending them to you, is because I am suffering. I can't unsee those things, and memories stick. They stick. They stick. So if
You're
I have to
welcome.
see it, yeah, okay, well, whatever. I guess I'll take that as a you're welcome. Also, I think there needs to be some type of shit pump shirt collaboration, because if one more person asks me for a shirt that says shit pump on it, because now that's started from your show. So thank you for that. So
That's kind of your term, though. I would say run with that one. I mean, that just kind of came up in conversation. That's definitely a north of the border term, I would say. I've never heard an American say that.
I have
So
now.
I have now, but I would say run with that sucker as fast as you can. I would give that one over to you.
All right, fine. I get it. I see what just happened there. That was a
No,
polite
I'm
way.
telling you, I think your market, you will have a bigger market for that than I would.
You will have a bigger market than that than I would. Oh, I love it so much. That's fucking fantastic. So what else has been going on with you lately? Because I've been seeing some of the episodes you've been putting out, and I listened to the one that you did with Evan recently. I
Mhm.
think it was great. But what's been going on with you? What's the latest on Andy? Because other than the show, I mean, have you been working on any other projects that I need to be knowing about?
Um, no, I mean, like we were talking about, or I mentioned briefly before you started recording, I mean, subtraction is a very powerful tool. And I'm not really looking to add a bunch of other stuff in my life right now. I am enjoying where I live. I try to structure my day around kind of like the middle of the day where I will go and do jujitsu because I find it to be very mentally empowering and physically beneficial for me. The podcast studio, which you've been to, I'm sitting in right now, is a
Yeah.
block away from the gym that I train. So it's very nice to have that ecosystem really close. Uh, the US is fluxing back and forth between let's open up, let's close back down, let's open up, let's close back down, let's just not make our mind up. So
Right.
I used to do a lot of public speaking, which I enjoyed doing. Some of it's coming back, but I've actually been turning down a lot of the requests that come my way because I'm kind of just enjoying where I'm living and
Right.
what it is that I'm doing. So I'm trying to build my life, the future, professionally to be very close in proximity wise. So, you mentioned Evan. He came on. I have a full episode with him coming out Monday. The Friday episode was just like a quick Q&A about coffee stuff.
Nice.
So myself and my business partner are building a Black Rifle franchise here in downtown Kalispell, which is about 3 blocks from the studio. But I'm actually going to build a new studio
Yeah, that's right.
inside of the property boundaries in there. So I'm going to, get rid of the curtains and actually have some graphic. I have a good idea of what I want the design to be. So that'll probably be the last iteration of the studio because I'm going to build it to be something that I can grow into as opposed to something
Right.
grow out of. Uh, and that's kind of about it. I mean, it's definitely fall here in Montana. I think we're going to start seeing some snow within the next month or so. I'm looking forward to going up and snowboarding a bunch this season. I've got hunting season right around the corner. I go hunting next week for elk with my bow. But that's about it. I mean, I'm doing the best I can just to kind of stay in Montana. I really enjoy it. Nothing crazy on the horizon that I'm working myself towards.
Well, no, because you already do have a lot. There's all of those things I was gonna kind of bump into, but I didn't know really what you wanted me to talk about and not talk about because we spoke about a couple of those things in private. So I didn't want to be the one to bring them up. That's
Yeah,
why I asked. So that's exciting about the Black Rifle Coffee. So how long until that's actually open?
that is an interesting question. We were hoping to have it open by early summer of next year, but given the delays in sourcing some of the material, specifically structural steel, it's very likely that it will be late Q3, if not mid Q4 of next year, which is not optimal timing. I would love to do it in the summertime.
Right.
But like right now, the best estimate I can give anybody is late 2022, which is super unfortunate. But I think what would suck more is doing a little bit of construction and then waiting for weeks or months for the pieces that you need to build. I would rather
Yep.
just wait, get everything stacked up, put a shovel in the ground, and then just build through the whole project.
Right. And do it properly. And then that way it flows much easier. And if you're gonna have the studio in there, it keeps things clean. Which makes a lot of sense. But I'm excited for that. For next time I force myself down there, I'm going to come check that out because I've been to your area and I can understand you're wanting to stay in that area.
Yeah.
It's really welcoming and everyone was really kind there. And I say this with like the most upcoming amounts of love, but honestly, it's a weird feeling when you go down to the States and people are nicer than they are when you come back to Canada. It's really
Which is weird
mind
because most people down here will say Canadians are the nicest people that they've ever met. Like super
I
polite, very nice. I think you guys are just getting
shit
broad
kicked.
terms. Yeah, I think you guys are getting jerked around by your government quite a bit, and people are just kind of getting to their wits' end with it. The rope is fraying, and they're getting to the end.
They are, and we are. Well, some are. It's interesting. We've got the election in 3 days, and it we
How do you
just
think
found
that'll
out.
go?
Oh, it's I think at this point, based off of the information I have and what it looks like from early voting, we started early voting on the 10th of September. Because they put in the vaccine passports on the 13th of September. So they had to initially give people in British Columbia an opportunity to vote, actually go into a building that we're allowed to attend into, and just, that freedom to walk in a building and have our right to vote. But then I just found out last night that they're doing this really quietly and no one knows about it. So PEI, so the other side of Canada, a lot of people are just being put into isolation. Like they're putting in a government lockdown in the province and they're not allowing people to go vote on the 20th. And the response,
That
I
doesn't
have a
sound right.
do you want to hear the response from
Yeah.
the Canadian? Yeah, because somebody private messaged this to me, and I don't have a big platform, but when somebody who is legitimately terrified comes to me and says, "You have a bigger platform than me. Can you say something? Because no one knows what's going on here." So she says, "You have more people, you will reach more than I ever will in PEI, but some will not be able to vote on Monday because they've been put into forced isolation." So the Elections Canada response was, "Hi there, thank you for reaching out. We agree that this is an unfortunate situation. Voting options are determined by the Canadian Election Act. And if the elector who has not already voted at an advance poll or requested a special ballot is unable to go to the polls on election day because of them being put into forced isolation, there is no other options. We have done our best to ensure the availability of voting options. Important dates and deadlines are known. We sincerely regret any instance where an elector will be unable to vote."
Hmm.
So
I don't like that.
I don't like that. And people don't
When you
know
say
about that.
PEI, are you talking about Prince Edward Island?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a it's a little more of a swing area right now because normally I think the Liberals win that. And the Liberals also normally win Nova Scotia, but the Conservatives so far have won those areas because of everything that's being done by the teacher. I don't even call him my prime minister. He doesn't deserve that title, because that is required and given only to leaders. And that is not a leader if I've ever seen one. And so they're going through that. British Columbia is having similar issues with that because we are the first to do a forced, I think we were the first official to do a forced vaccine passport. Quebec is on its way. Alberta has just been given the riot act that they will be getting in as well. And so this seems to be going across the country. And the issue really is lying with, at first, everyone was ready to vote Conservative, whether they were a Conservative or not, because O'Toole said that he would keep the vax passports a non-mandatory thing because of our Charter of Rights, which it falls under. And then he ran with that for a while at the very beginning of the snap election and got a lot of people's attention and votes. And then he changed his mind on September 4th and said that he will be imposing those vax passports. So between Trudeau, who is given over $240 million to pledging between now and 2024 to Afghanistan, which we now know will go to the Taliban, and is still not stated that he will pull that aid back. So our taxpayer dollars will go to that, as well as he completely abandoned thousands of Canadians and Canadian visa holders in Afghanistan with no repercussions or willingness to comment on the situation, while all local and national media in Canada, after reaching out to me, canceled all interviews once I told them what was going on in the country, and responded with, "We cannot interview or talk about Afghanistan. We have been told to only talk about the politics and the election going on in Canada." So he somehow skated that situation like it was nothing. He put two individuals on one email address that every Afghani Canadian would be emailing, hoping that that would be enough to respond. He put less than 70 military individuals on the ground in Afghanistan and pulled them the Thursday before the actual deadline, wouldn't let them leave the base or pull anybody. They weren't allowed to do any exfil. And then he left it so that all Canadians, when they were emailing in to get support, did not get a response. So their biometric data, visa paperwork, and their passports could not be verified, which means no Canadian, no American, no British, no anyone could pull those Canadians out of the country. So he basically fucked off with no accountability, and the media has not held him accountable. So far, the Conservatives are in the lead. It wouldn't shock me if somehow magically Trudeau flipped that over on the 20th and he got back in. But he has stated very clearly that if he does not get majority, he will call another snap election in 18 months.
That sounds like a real shit show.
Yeah, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I can't even go into my son's school.
Can your son go into the school?
He can, but I can't.
Why is that?
So, because of COVID, the COVID restrictions.
So you just have to drop him off outside?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can't do that. I can't go into, if you don't have a vax passport, you can't go into restaurants. You can't go anywhere. You're being treated very much like a second-class citizen if you're not vaccinated in this country. And our media, like yours, is doing a great job of dividing us even more and on an aggressive rate. And they refuse to do anything for you if you are sick currently. For example, my husband had some really bad health issues I've talked publicly about a month ago, where they thought he had a heart attack. And the ambulance service is so bad that they put us on hold. And then once you got there, once we told them that my husband had cannabis, that they deemed him as a drug addict and refused to provide care. And so that same weekend, I got strep throat. So I went to 6 separate walk-in clinics. My throat was closing and was turned away at every single one because I couldn't show vaccine status and I couldn't show a negative COVID test. So I wasn't allowed in. And then they did that again with my 5-year-old son. So the problem is right now, they're saying that all Canadians should be having the right amount of healthcare, whether they're vaccine or not. But when you go, there's been several reports of people being turned away and children being turned away because they don't have the vaccine.
Yeah, that's everything you're describing sounds super fucked.
So what does that sound like to you? Does that sound like weirdly totalitarian, or is that just me? Like,
It's bizarre. It's beyond totalitarian. It's people will oftentimes talk about the healthcare in Canada as a juxtaposition to the United States. Like, hey, it's free and it's for everybody. Everybody should have universal healthcare. And then you listen to those same people say, well, except for those that aren't vaccinated. It's like, fuck right off. It's
yeah,
like
and
universal
it's
healthcare or
happening.
well, and also, I mean, I've had very good experiences with healthcare here in the United States. I've never had an experience like you are describing. Um, and people forget that, universal healthcare or healthcare for everybody provided by the state doesn't, you're not talking about the quality of healthcare that you may be getting or who's
Mhm.
going to actually be paying for that through your tax dollars. So I don't know. I think this is what happens when, you know, ideologies actually meet the reality of the pavement and people have to start making hard decisions based in real life, not this fucking pie in the sky ideologies. And it doesn't end up looking good. It's a shit show. What you're describing sounds horrible.
It is. And you know what's really troubling too is like you understand you have a business, you know how this works. You know, your Cleared Hot is a profitable podcast. It is a business. And if someone were to say to you that you can't do that, but Amazon across the street can, I mean, I feel like people in your state would show up with guns.
I don't know if showing up with guns would be the right solution to that one, but they definitely wouldn't take it sitting down. People would do everything they could to fight for their ability to provide for themselves for sure.
Yeah,
And I
it's
don't
it
and I don't mean with guns. I mean, metaphorically, I guess I mean, but
I
yeah,
think
it's
there's this idea because you guys have access to weapons. You guys have access to things that most people in Canada, we've lost the right to have to either stand up for ourselves. And I know that's a drastic, I mean that, and I know it's drastic, but that's the point at which my country is currently at.
well, if you look back at history and you look at individuals or political groups that come into power and they want to seize all power and control for themselves, one of the first things they do is they take firearms away from the public. And
Correct.
there's a reason that they do that. And that reason speaks for itself. So,
Well, look at Australia right now.
yeah, talk about literally and figuratively being an island. My God, I don't know when they're going to open up again either. I mean, some of the restrictions that they're under with like these QR codes and, just the amount of tracking that's going on. I think it's a very good. I hope people pay attention to that stuff and they realize, once you cede power of any kind to people who have this insatiable desire for power, like you're not going to get it back. You can
No.
give them, you could fill up a bucket a drop at a time. It'll take a really long time, but at the end of that, you're not going to have any fucking water, and somebody else is. And good luck getting it back.
Well, and it's the reason I bring all these things up to you isn't just to like bitch and whine about Canada. It's because you have a unique perspective and viewpoint on this, I think, because you've been into countries where that power has been taken and you've seen how that works. And I I I, I want, if you can, could you explain a little bit of what that starts to look like and how that where what that endpoint can look like? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you're talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, which would be the most recognizable places where uh, probably just incredibly stark differences between the Western world. Let's just call it the Western world in general. People can define that however they want to, but in this instance, I'll say, the US and Canada. Um, you want to talk about actual oppression and consequences to voicing a different opinion. And I'm not talking about your Twitter account gets suspended or your Instagram picture gets, blurred and somebody has to click on it to actually look at the picture or comments being censored. I'm talking about getting beaten to death. I'm talking about having consequences generationally for your family if you proclaim an allegiance or alliance to somebody other than is currently in power. I'm talking about people getting their fucking heads cut off on the corners of streets because they have a belief system that is different than those that are in power or that hold the majority in that particular area. The literal definition of, true oppression, and oppression not through mandates, but oppression through physical violence that most people would be shocked if they got a look at the not the daily physical violence, but I almost want to say the socially acceptable level of physical violence in in those two countries. It's just such a stark difference than the reality of people who live in the Western world. It's hard to. I mean, it would be hard for me to judge their quality of life. That would be a better question for them because their optic on the world, in my experience, is much smaller and directly in front of their face. They don't have the luxury of, surfing Instagram and looking at other people and influencers posting pictures from fill in the blank or traveling and seeing the rest of the world. They have, they have to deal with their survival right in front of their face. And once you get exposed to that and you spend a little bit of time around that and you see the consequences of that, I mean, for me, it's hard not to be very appreciative of what we have and very unwilling to surrender any portion of what we have to people in power who I don't necessarily believe anymore have my best interests in mind. And that's both on the left and in the US political system. Somebody described it to me in a way that I hadn't really heard. I don't think it's a new term, but people always say left or right. And he's like, listen, man, they're wings of the same bird, which is totally true. And I'm not very trustful of that bird, whether it's the left wing or the right wing. And I don't want to give them any more power. I want to hold that power. And I also, though, I have never looked at the government to provide me personal protection. So, I mean, obviously at a national level, right? Like from a military perspective or a not socioeconomic, but like a global economic perspective. Like obviously, yes, they're, negotiating deals and stuff like that on behalf of the United States, but I don't look to the government to provide for me. I don't look to them as a solution. I actually want them as little involved in my life as humanly possible. I think people's lives would be better if they took more ownership of themselves and their outcome and just don't outsource any of that shit. Hold on to that stuff for yourself. I think life is just better. So I'm not a fan of taking a drop from myself and giving it into somebody else's bucket, especially when those people, there's never enough drops for them. They'll take everybody's drops and it's still not going to be enough.
Do you think it's too late in terms of the giving too much away? For example, the intellectual property theft of China and the overreach and the majority of our manufacturing being done there. Is it too little too late for pretty much everything, it feels like, for manufacturing?
I don't know if it's ever too little or too late. I think the path out of it would be difficult. And I think it would require something that bird that we were talking about, it would require from them something that they seem unwilling to do. And that is an open and honest, transparent conversation to talk about where we actually are right now, how much we rely on other countries, whether it's from a production perspective or just generally borrowing money. I mean, the US borrows money from China like it's fucking going out of style. But I don't think it would be impossible to recover if we wanted to in those areas, but people we'd have to have a really honest conversation. Like, hey, if we want to do this, this is what it's going to cost, because this is what we gave up in under the guise of, hey, we want cheap shit. I want it's not, I was just about to say I want my iPhone to be cheap. And it's like, holy shit, they just launched the new one. And like the upper end models, like $1,500 fucking dollars, which is a lot of money. Yeah. For like the new iPhone, fill in the blank, the iPhone 27.
Just do packing tape like I do. It's fine.
Yeah. Or just get a case. It's funny. People buy a $1,500 phone and be like, I don't want to pay $40 for a phone case. I'm like, yeah, cool story. All right. It's like, I want a Lamborghini.
Not about the case.
I want a Lamborghini, but I can't afford the gas. It's like, fuck right off with that.
Not the cost. It's not about the cost of the phone. It's how it feels in my fucking hand.
Yeah. Keep
my
using
hand.
Tape. That's fine. It's fine.
Hey, do you see how big that is in my little hand already? I can barely.
Different sizes. That's a choice. You're complaining to me about choices. That's just your white privilege coming out, and that's the patriarchy talking. I don't know what either of those two things mean, but I hear them used a lot, and apparently they're magic, so I just use them on you. And you actually can't say anything in return. Otherwise, you're racist.
I literally just got fucked with my own words on my own show. And I don't think everyone is everybody. I don't think anyone in my life has ever said, oh, you're using your white privilege. That is legitimately the first time in my life. And I'm gonna slap you in the face with the fact that I'm Hungarian, motherfucker. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
so don't.
No,
I
but
mean,
to get back to what we're talking about, I don't know. I don't think that there is ever a place where it's too far gone,
right.
but the farther that it goes, the more steps would be required to get it back. And it would require everybody, speaking about the US, specifically
Right.
manufacturing, guess what? Things are going to get more expensive. And that's the
Yes.
way it's going to be. So you can't bitch about the cost. And like, I can't think right now of a good example, but, be prepared. If the United States wants to be more self-sustaining, shit's going to cost more. So
Everything's going to cost more. The cost of your clothes is going to go up
yes,
astronomically. If you thought somebody going into Walmart buying a shirt for $15 was like, because some people legitimately think that's expensive, that shirt at Walmart is going to cost triple that at a bare minimum, because the rates that you have to pay people in the United States to work, and the hours, and the amount that you can work them, and the way that it is, even Walmart's going to be expensive.
yeah, and I would hope though that those prices would come down over time, right?
Right.
That would be the goal, but that would be a timeline that I don't know if most people would tolerate. I'm not going to say the attention span is shorter for people right now, but it does seem like people struggle to really view a long-term goal versus their short-term aspirations. Like we're talking 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 years. And
Hmm.
historically, I don't know if most people in the US, they think about time like that. And then you look at countries like China, they're playing the long game. They think
Oh,
generationally. Um, so and look at how China didn't used to kick our ass when it came to production, but they played the fucking long game and they played it well.
well, I feel like from the limited perspective I have of that country, because I do have factories that I work with that are American owned in Taiwan and things like that, and they think so far ahead, and I don't know that I fully grasped that generational stretch, and really to the extent that they're willing to go and really do the long game. But it seems like it's working incredibly well for them. It seems like they started decades ago, and now they're just starting to see the fruits of their labor kind of come to fruition, and they're imposing those things and capturing, it seems like, more and more land while doing it. And that is terrifying, to see people overrun areas in this 21st century, but do it right under our faces with no repercussions whatsoever, i.e., Afghanistan and our pullout and everything we did. So I'm curious where you're standing on that, how you're feeling about that, and what that's kind of been like for you.
Afghanistan?
Yeah.
um, I hate to see what happened there, but I'm not surprised that it happened. I've spoken with a lot of vets who served over there, and not a single one of them is surprised at the outcome, but most of them, if not all of them, are surprised with the velocity that the Taliban seem to be able to take over and fill in that dead space. I know there are a lot of vets that are struggling with Afghanistan specifically, and they're saying things. Not all, but some are saying things like, "Well, I feel like my service was for nothing. What the fuck were we even doing there in the first place?" And what I would say to those vets, and not that it's wrong to feel that way, but there are different ways to think about things, and if you can change your headspace and how you approach something mentally, it can really impact how much the situation actually is able to impact you. Afghanistan, to me, I think about my service in Afghanistan. I spent a few years there. It was never actually about Afghanistan. It was about going after the people who had planned and executed the attacks of 9/11, and then denying them the ability to do so, whether it be through a safe haven or access to personnel, or equipment or material that they could use to plan for future attacks. It wasn't until like 2010 that I was over there that I even heard the term nation building and by, with, and through. When I first was over there before then, it was very targeted. We were going after people Uh, and we were going after them really, really hard, and we were denying them all the things that they needed. And the reality is, there hasn't been another attack like 9/11 in the 20 years that we were involved over there. And there's a reason for that. And that's because of people's service in that country. And again, though, it wasn't ever about Afghanistan. I mean, I think the vets need to remember that we weren't actually ever there to save Afghanistan from itself. Um,
Right.
and we knew that we were going to leave at some point. I think there is an incredible amount of criticism that is incredibly valid and due about how we withdrew and the shit show that we left behind. I mean, I don't care what I don't care what president or his staff planned the withdrawal. If you're sitting in the seat and your plan is going to shit, stop the plan and make a new one. You don't have to
Right.
continue down this path. Well, if you do, if you continue down a path knowing that it's going to lead you to failure, you don't get to blame it on anybody other than yourself. Like, that's the thing. Like, hey, you're in the seat now. This is the plan that was created before you came into office. This is what we agreed to. You start executing and it's falling apart on the ground. Fucking stop before it becomes a crisis and an emergency. I think we could have exited so much better. We could have taken care of our partner forces and the people that are now clamoring to get out of that country. I mean, like, you're telling me as the Western world, we couldn't have figured out a way to get them out of there first. Like, come on. And again, I served at a tactical level. I didn't serve at a strategic or an operational level, but I have to believe that there are people who are smarter than myself, who understand how these things work, that could come up with a better plan than what we executed, or a better execution of the plan that we had going forward. So I knew personally that Afghanistan was going to crumble onto itself. I think most people that were there that served with the partner force and knew who we were going to be leaving behind to defend their own country knew that that was going to happen as well. But it's hard to see. It's always hard for me to see that type of suffering, and knowing that you put in that literal blood, sweat, and tears. But people who think that their service was, lost or wasted, I would reframe how you think about it. It was towards the end, I think we were doing what we could to prop up Afghanistan, but we didn't give it our best effort. We gave it probably a D plus at best, if we're being totally honest. And I say that again, only viewing it from the tactical level. I don't know the
Right.
operational and strategic plans that were in place, or, but remember what it is that you actually went there for and the overall purpose of that service. It wasn't for waste. And it was anything but that. And I can understand them, feeling like perhaps it was, but if you're struggling with what's happening in Afghanistan, just take a few moments and just think about what exactly we were there for and what we weren't there for. We were not there to turn Afghanistan into the Western world. What was going to happen and what is happening there now, I'm sorry. I mean, and people may not understand it if they've never been there, but that's what was going to happen, whether we left 10 years ago or 10 years from now.
Why is it that we completely left it all? I'm not saying full fighting force. I'm not saying, FOBs and bases in every part of
So,
Afghanistan. I'm saying we have bases. I say we because I think of, I don't say I think of myself as American, but we're NATO. So I don't mean Canada specific when I speak because I know I'm Canadian, but I say we as in like a fighting force. We have places in Korea, we have places in Japan, we have places in Germany, we have places everywhere. Why is it that out of all of the places that wars have been fought in the past 100 years, that seems to be the place that there was nothing really left?
nothing left, as in we just completely pulled up and left
We
chalk.
just completely, yeah. And we had, I mean, there's you guys, you spent 20 years creating a ground force of eyes and ears that is invaluable to quite literally any government that comes in and takes that list and hones those resources for themselves. I'm just a little confused because when somebody asks me the question of why did we go, number one, and then why did we leave that way, number two, I struggle with answering both of those sincerely with a very, in-depth, knowledgeable answer because it is very frustrating and confusing currently, in my opinion.
I mean, answering the why we went is a very easy one for me. Why we left the way that we did is one that I understand less. I think the decision to leave the way that we did was more political than anything. I think it
Okay.
became at a political level, and this is total just like my own personal guess as to
Yeah,
why.
we're both not
Yeah,
generals who have ran this place. Like,
I would say it became such a pig with lipstick that the decision was like, we can't keep kicking this down from administration to administration. We don't know how to end this appropriately. So fuck it. We're going to rip the band-aid off right now and just deal with the aftermath. I think at the end of the day, it was a political decision. That doesn't make it any more, right or wrong. That doesn't make it any easier or harder for the warfighter. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess only time will tell.
right.
If we went there to deny space and equipment and people for those that were planning attacks like 9/11, and we just left the Taliban with their best armament that they've ever had in 20 years. They just leveled up generationally, like multiple generations of their own equipment. I mean, only time will tell whether or not we were successful at all. I know that we were very successful while we were there, denying them that space and ability to do so. But, now that we're completely out of there, will the work that we put in those 20 years, will it kind of erode like the ocean tide does? My personal guess is yes, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the long-term answer was you keep a small force there. You just commit to the fact that maybe we're going to be there forever. I mean, I don't know what the fuck forever means. We're still in Japan and places in Europe, although those are so incredibly different cultures than
Of course.
Afghanistan. So I don't know. I mean, I wish I had better answers. Like I said, I worked over there at a tactical level and did the best that I
Mhm.
could to have an impact at a day-to-day level. I would love to be a fly on the wall when these conversations were had or when they are being had now. Because I have some questions of my own and I have more questions than answers. But it's easy for me to get frustrated about it too when I view it from the perspective of what the fuck were we doing there anyway? And then I come
Right.
back to, well, I know what I was doing there. I know what I was trying to do. I know what I was able to, at least in my very small piece of the puzzle or spoke in the wheel, however you'd want to describe it. I was able to have an impact. And I hope that, I was able to fill a role so somebody else's son or daughter or husband or wife didn't have to do so. And my service wasn't about Afghanistan. It was about what I was trying to prevent from happening again in this country.
Right. I'm curious as well because frankly, you guys left more equipment than like the Canadian military has combined. Like it kind of boggled my brain, frankly. The idea, the I think the thing that hit me really hard was, when we were working to get some people out, getting all of these communications coming in and knowing well in advance before the IED went off that there was an IED, knowing well in advance that there were threats and thinking that that wouldn't have happened. I mean, for God's sake, it was a matter of time. I'm quite shocked it took that long, having that many people outside those gates for an IED to actually go off. And that's troubling in itself. And that's saying a lot, just the choices we made and left the soft targets just to sit there. Um, do you think that there was, besides it being, the US, do you think that there was a reason why more of the allies didn't come to support the actual pullout effort?
Logistically, they may not have been able to. So that could be one potential reason. But two, you know, diving into a crisis and just throwing, and not having a plan, because what it seemed like is that the plan went south. It became a total emergency. The people that had the ability to do so, they threw a bunch of resources at it and then they got the fuck out of there. And let's be clear, not everybody who should have gotten out of there was able to get out of there. So it's not like they solved the problem. They did like the best that they could because of this arbitrary date on a calendar. and got
Why the
out of
date
there.
too? Why do you know
I don't
why they picked?
no, and so and again, that's I believe that was an agreement that Trump had made with the Taliban. I think
Okay.
so. This is where my knowledge of the politics behind the scene gets very, very thin. But it'll go back to I'll take a strategic level decision and put it in the mindset of somebody who worked at a tactical level. Like, okay, this is what we're planning on doing. This is how we are planning our mission to go. And then you get on the ground and you try to force reality to your plan. I've never had that work. What you need to do is look and see how your plan is actually, how it's actually doing against the reality that the world is presenting you. And if it's not going good, change the fucking plan.
Right.
Add another week to that timeline. And again, I am not anybody who has any understanding about how that date was arrived upon, how difficult it would be to change the date. But I feel like it would be easier to change the date than deal with the shit that is still going on there now. The thousands of people that are still trapped there. The people that we need to get out who supported our country in their own country and are still living there and will suffer the consequences. Like, to me, I mean, isn't that more important than an arbitrary date on a calendar? I mean, it's not like the Taliban wasn't going to take over the country a week later. I mean, they had already taken over the country. It was just the goddamn airport at that point.
Right. What is it that yeah, I know because Panjshir fell, which had been a stronghold against the Taliban for my God, for a very long time. And to see that go, that signified a huge thing for them. And I know that was all over the media, just that territory alone because of the significance it held for just, fighting against the Taliban. What did you make of the weapons being left and also not just being left, but being left in the conditions that they were? Because if I'm not mistaken, one of the things that I was taught, the most important thing that I was taught was how to disable that artillery gun at any point if we were being overrun, was to make sure that everything was decommissioned to the point it would just be scrap metal.
Yeah, I think the volume of equipment left behind is directly tied to the volume of time that we spent in that country. I think the plan was for the United States to train and equip the ANA and the ANP, which is the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police, or any other partner force that we were working with. So, and again, this is the difference between a theoretical plan and then the plan on the ground. So theoretically, you're like, oh, well, we need X amount of armament. And then you work with the partner force and you realize, like, hey, if we leave all of this excess or we leave all of these things, if the country does fall, we're arming the Taliban as opposed to our partner forces. And I think, again, it's tied to the velocity towards the end with which the withdrawal occurred. So, again, it goes back to there was a plan somewhere put into place by people that I'm not sure who they were. But that plan in execution really, really, really fucking sucked. And instead of changing it, they kind of looks like just doubled down. And I think that's how that stuff ended up there. Maybe they didn't even have time to decondition it. I really don't know. I mean, the way that it worked for us in the community that I came from, like, I was responsible for the serialized inventory of the things that I took with me. Like, I left nothing behind
Mhm.
for our partner force. So that how that even works, that system even works, I'm not familiar with. I'm used to the system where, like, if I lose something, I'm in fucking trouble. Like, I don't
Yeah,
I
you're
don't get to
getting
leave my
charged.
yeah, I don't get to leave my rifle behind. So it's hard for me to speak about it from a perspective of being educated about the process because, quite frankly, I don't understand it.
Yeah, that just felt funny to me. That felt too planned. That felt too comfortable because once I was speaking to people that were on the ground before they left, they were told to make sure everything was in working order. They were told to make sure that the airport was clean. They were told to make sure that you didn't smash any of the weapons. And then you would see the odd rogue person go just start hammering out Humvees and things because the idea of just leaving that just goes against everything you're taught in the military. I mean, for God's sakes, there you would literally be charged if you lost a piece of equipment all the way down to a light on your rifle. So that just boggled my brain. That felt too planned. That felt too uncomfortable for me. And that felt like we just gave them every opportunity that you took away for the past 20 years to close their breathing room. It felt like it not only opened it up again, but it just dropped an oxygen bomb in it and said, here you go. Let's see what you can
Yeah,
do with this.
and I'm sure on paper there was the plan was this is for our allies. But whoever was making that plan was being dishonest about, not our allies, our partner force, I should say. But whoever was
Yeah.
making that plan was being very dishonest about the capability of that partner force.
It's interesting that you say that too, because I mean, you've seen, I'm assuming, I'm sorry, correction. I'm assuming that you've seen the way that we train the ANA and that we train any of the Terps that are with us and anything like that, and the equipment we give them. It's interesting because you would think that after all of the training and education that we gave them, that they would be able to hold on for a little more than 3 days. But it felt like that was a really quick fall. And on top of it, it seeing and knowing and watching it fall the way it fell, but then hearing people like Crystal Ball say they're never going to be able to fly those Blackhawks. They don't have pilots. They don't have that. And less than 24 hours later, seeing a Blackhawk flying in Afghanistan with not an American, it just, that reiterated to me the level of just naivety. What's the word I'm looking for there? What's
Naivete.
naivete? Ooh, I like that. I'm gonna have to fix that. Naivete of the Western world and thinking that these people were complete idiots. They're not.
Well, it may not have been somebody who was Afghani flying the Black Hawk. There's plenty of other nation state actors around the world that were fighting a proxy war against the United States in Afghanistan. I mean, I don't know how to fly helicopters. I know how to fly airplanes. Airplanes, as a general rule, I mean, they kind of all fly the same. That doesn't mean you can start them the same, or the sequence is the same, or the avionics is the same. But I am sure that within a 12-hour time period, you could get somebody from another country who knows how to fly that Black Hawk over there and fly it. Like, I actually would like to know who the pilots were that were flying that. And I also wouldn't surprise me if the United States had spent a lot of time and energy and effort actually training some Afghan pilots to fly Blackhawks. I mean, they do have an Air Force, they do have a fixed wing Air Force. So it's possible that it was an Afghan flying that, but it's also incredibly plausible that it was somebody from outside of that country who got there and then, turn the ignition, turn the key on in that thing, which I'm pretty sure they're not started by a key, but you know what I mean, as a metaphor.
As the metaphor that it is. I was told by someone who it was, and I'm trying to see because I wrote it down. I don't believe it was it if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't an Afghani actually. I was just kind of making
Flying
a
a
point, but
helicopter is from my understanding, if you fly helicopters, like other nations have helicopters that are similar to Blackhawks.
right.
It's not like this gigantic leap in thought process to say, oh, well, maybe one of them went over there and, like, trust me,
Yeah. It
Chinese,
wasn't
Russian, like, fill in the blank. There's plenty of countries that could go over there. And what would we do? Like in peacetime is like we would do MTTs, mobile training teams. We send a team of subject matter experts to host nation forces, and you go and you work with them. And that should exist for aviation as well.
well, then that's my, I guess that leans into my point even more of we left a vacuum and it's going to be filled by someone else, and it's already being filled by other countries, and that to me feels more dangerous than anything, just having other countries have access to any of our technology and the way it works, and those certain countries getting it and knowing that we know it's China that has come in. We understand that Pakistan has come in. We understand how all this is happening now, and it's created this wide open space for people to just grab our tech, pick through it, and make us more and more vulnerable. And I'm still not understanding why that is acceptable to not only anybody in the United States, but anybody in Canada for that matter. Just because they think we weren't fully there for a little while now doesn't mean that we still weren't a part of it. We still didn't leave people behind. So it infuriates me on a deep level, Andy, on a deep, deep level. Not the sense of that I feel like it was for nothing. I disagree with that statement when people say that. I think when they feel like, oh, what was the last 20 years for? What did I even go there for? I know what I did when I was there, and I'm comfortable within that. And I know that I helped where I could help. So I hold on to that aspect of it, because if not, it'll just be this spiraling drain. And I think it's unhealthy to think that way anyway, frankly.
What's happening in Afghanistan is not happening because of the soldiers who had their actual boots on the ground. It's
Right.
happening in spite of the effort and time and sacrifice that those people put in at a level that is far above their head.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think it's being shown by the general public and the reaction to it and how they are speaking about it with what they think is knowledge, but yet it's just from Instagram posts and hearing what the news says, and they still yet think it's acceptable to have not only an opinion, but a strong, aggressive opinion about something they have little to no knowledge of, the country and the way it works and how it will affect. Do you do you actually think there is a chance now that we've left that door open that China's going to come in and overtake that entire country?
I mean, I'm not an expert on global politics by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, probably. I'd say there's a chance for sure.
Right. Hmm. I'm always curious about people like you and your thoughts on that and
Yeah, but I
whether
don't. But again, my background has nothing to do with the movements of nations.
fair.
And I understand to a very small degree warfare at a tactical level. And I mean, I oftentimes will hear people talking well outside of their wheelhouse. They served at a tactical level, but they want to talk strategic policy. And it's like, you might have
Right.
developed an understanding of that, but let's not pretend that your background somehow makes you and your opinion this unassailable fucking fountain of knowledge where everything that you're saying is true. The reality is you had no exposure to that for most people. And the people who
Hmm.
did have exposure to it, I try to listen to them when they talk about it, but I did not. So I try to be very cautious about what I say, and I try to be very honest about what I know and what I don't know.
Right. Um, okay, well, I'll stop prying about that. I guess I'm trying to wrap my brain around a lot of things, and it seems like the more people I talk to about it that have been in your position, I get a similar answer, and that that matters. I think it's important to acknowledge that, not everybody understands policy, but understanding the culture and the boots on the ground aspect is, I feel like, just as important. And it goes to show how important it is, because if that was paid attention to during this pullout, this, little bit more, this might have been done a lot better, a lot cleaner, with less deaths, and possibly would have saved thousands more. Um,
I mean, it's a failure in leadership. Um,
right.
you sit here in the US and it's like, it was Trump's fault. It's Biden's fault. It's like, how about it was probably Bush and Obama and Trump and Biden's fault altogether.
Hmm.
Um, to varying degrees, you could argue about that, but it was a football that was kicked down the road or a can that was kicked down the road. But when it comes to how it played out in the end, the person sitting in the seat owns that. And
Right.
anybody in any administration that tries to point the finger at the previous administration for something that they are in charge of can fuck right off. That's a failure in leadership. You have to own it. And fuck, if you want to say that you're the leader of the free world, then act like it and audible on your plan, and don't allow something to turn into the crisis that it did.
Right. I couldn't I couldn't agree with that statement more. I take such issue when people come to me and say, "Oh, this is actually Trump's fault." I'm like, you're looking you're so narrow. The lens is so narrow for you. You can't zoom out and see this monstrosity that started and the momentum it carried, and people are just, it seems like they're very blind to it. There was something I learned about you before I had you on, and I didn't realize this when we met. I knew that you had done a lot of work in terms of, you know, with your skydiving and your wingsuit. I knew
Mhm.
about that, but I didn't realize why you were actually doing that, and what you were doing it for. And then I learned it was the Navy SEAL Foundation and
Mhm.
all of that. And that to me was super impressive, and that shows your charitable side. And I want to know, what do you work with charities still, or is that something that's important to you? Or are you, because I know you're really, like I said, you reiterated the fact that you're trying to make things much cleaner and keep
Yeah.
you within a certain area, but like, do you still have any affiliations with any of those organizations?
I don't have direct ties with any VSOs or veteran service organizations. I did the fundraising directly with the SEAL Foundation. And I chose that one because obviously it has a DNA tie to my military background, but there are tens of thousands of them that are out there. And what I will try to do is, when the opportunity presents itself, I will try to provide an organization, a platform to talk about what they do. And then the people that are spoken to by that, or the message resonates, then they can take that, that energy or that inspiration that they get from that, and they can involve themselves with it directly. There's just too many like, to me, I don't want to just be like SEAL, 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 because there's Green
Right.
Beret ones, there's Rangers ones, there's PJ, there's CCT, there's regular, big Navy, there's tank, there's big Army. It's like, what I recommend to people is find whatever speaks to you and support them to whatever level that you can. And I try to provide whatever platform I have on the podcast. I don't discriminate if it's an Army charity or a Navy charity. Like, I don't give a shit either
Right.
way. If I research it and I believe in what they're doing, I'll do everything I can to try to get that message out there. I think it's important to do that. But I don't work direct. I'm like not on the board of any
Yeah.
charities. I don't work directly. I don't have any direct ties with anything other than the Deliver Fund here in Kalispell. I've had Nick McKinley was on. He was the founder, and then Cara Smith, Cara the Huntress, and they do anti-human trafficking. And that's one thing that's like, you know what? This one is a lot easier because it doesn't matter what color your uniform was. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just not traffic human beings. So that one's just like, hey, let's just point as much information in that direction as all. But I also, like, I'm not on that board either.
Mm-hmm.
I try to actively push people towards that.
That's funny that you say that, because a really good person for you to talk to about that would be Alana Stott.
Okay.
She's fantastic. She does the anti-human trafficking. I believe she's doing a TED Talk on it. She's married to Dean Stott, the SBS British soldier. He was on Jocko as well. He had a book. Anyway, she's Mrs. Scotland, and she does deals in anti-human trafficking, and she's got a super powerful
Okay.
story behind that. She's fantastic. And she's also gorgeous. And she's a close protection officer, and I'm like one of her biggest fans. She's fantastic human. But anyway, what I was going to say to you was that's great though. And I like to acknowledge that, because sometimes I think there's this perspective of when people get to a certain point in either podcasting or in their careers or in all these different types of platforms that you have, that you work on, that there is this, there's this focus. And I think you do a lot to elevate and educate people on those charities, but I think sometimes it gets overlooked because you have these huge guests. And I always like to bring it back to, you were still a Navy SEAL, you still support these people, you still acknowledge these people, and you help to give them a platform. If you could give me, could you possibly give me maybe 3 of like the top ones that you would recommend for people if they're struggling with mental health that in the United States that are beneficial to contact?
See, and that's broad. Again, because of my particular background, I
Right.
really only know ones that touch the SEAL community. So I'm a bad resource for that. But what I will say is, regardless of whatever community you come from as a veteran, trust me. The last statistic I saw is that there were over 40,000 service-based organizations designed to help veterans. Get onto Google and do
Right.
some research. I mean, really.
Right.
Because the SEAL Foundation, trust me, has nothing against Green Berets. I love them. They're some of my best friends, but it's not a program or organization designed to work with that community. But there is a community, or I'm sorry, an organization that is designed to work with that community.
Right.
I'm just not sure what it is. I think
Right.
I think I've heard Evan talk about the Green Beret Foundation, and that would make
Mhm.
sense that they would call it that. So get on Google and do some research.
Cool. No, it's always important, and I think hearing that from people like you holds a lot of weight in taking accountability in your own self, and so saying those things is helpful for sure for people to hear. Um, I was going to ask you one other thing here, and then I was just talking about the charities, and my brain went sideways because as soon as I
Last thing,
said,
and then I got to bounce. You get like
I know
5
you do.
minutes.
I've got 5 minutes. Okay. Now I've got 700 questions, and now I'm trying to sift through them. Thanks for
Fire
that,
away.
Andy.
We'll do
Well,
rapid fire.
oh, fucking rapid fire stresses me out, man. You give me anxiety. God damn it. Okay. So, 3 things that you do for your mental health that keep you level and keep you kind of functioning throughout being Andy Stumpf, and what that's like. Give me those top 3 things that you do on a regular basis that really keep you level.
For me, my mental health has always been tied to physical activity. So I
Okay.
have to do something. I have to have an outlet. And like I mentioned, jujitsu for me, it's a great outlet because it's physically challenging, but also it's a learning process, and you end up in really shitty, compromised positions that you have to work your way through. So I get the physical and mental aspect of that. So for me, something physical activity. Number two is rest, which the community that I came from was like, fuck, you don't need to sleep. You need to sleep. You're a pussy. I'm like, okay, awesome. That's why I feel like I'm 98 fucking years old on the inside. So I really guard my rest and recovery time. And then I try to eat as clean as possible. And if I can do those three things, I feel like I can get myself into like third or fourth gear, and
Okay.
I can kind of cruise through the day. But those are the, I mean, those are, and all three of those things I have 100% control over. I don't need them to be provided by somebody else. I have
Mm-hmm.
complete control over those three things. And that's why I focus on them.
Well, that's it then. I guess that's all I need from you.
That's fair. It's
I
about all I
mean,
have to offer anyway.
okay. Well, I mean, whatever. At least I got everything out of you I could, other
And
than a fucking smile.
I don't smile. It uses too many muscles.
Well, that's also a lie because when we were talking about gay porn, you lit up. So that'll be the screenshot. That'll be your cover. It'll be a smile, and I'll find one. I'll sift through every single fucking clip, and I will send you
They're on
all of the
there. There's pictures
smiles.
on the internet. Do a little Google image search.
Please. Do you
There's
actually
a
think I use Google Images for my shit? No, I'll go through this thing and I'll
oh,
find
okay.
it.
Go ahead. Do whatever you want to. It's your show.
Look at this. Just the no give a shit fucking attitude. Never
It's your
stops
show.
with you.
It's your show. It's not mine.
See, you smirked. See,
There you
look,
go.
there it is. It happened. All right, friends. You
All
wanted
right.
to hear him. There he was. Thank you, Andy.
Yep. Sorry to let everybody down. On to the next episode.